Hello, everyone, and welcome to the third edition of On Queer Street, my new boxing podcast. It should be ours, really. I'm hoping to be joined by Mr. Rian Scalia for a second appearance any moment now. I think Ryan is due on at some stage this evening. So if you hear some headphones rattling around, that will probably be him joining the call a bit later on. I didn't do a show last week because there wasn't anything to preview, really. I don't think I watched any boxing at the weekend, actually. Maybe 5 or 10 minutes of highlights, and that was it. I don't think I watched anything live. So, for the first time in a while, there was absolutely nothing to talk about. I guess I will very, very briefly run back over the Showtime card from 2 weeks ago when, as everyone knows, I made a shitload of cash from the main event, betting the draw at 22-1. That's 22-1. I put £10 on it. You do the math. £220 profit, minus the outgoings of several other bets which were accidentally placed on other outcomes, such as the Anthony Dirrell fight to go the distance from the day before. I bet on that at, I think, 9-2. I think that was an error on the app of some kind. For some reason, that bet was placed. And I also bet, I actually meant to bet twice more on the draw. I wanted 3 bets on it, but I accidentally bet a DeGale knockout at 9-2 and the Jack decision at 4-1. So unfortunately, my winnings were cut into very slightly, but still came away with enough of a profit to buy a rug from India, which more details of which are available on my Twitter page. It's currently being made, will be delivered at some point in March. So I'll update everyone as and when I get dispatch confirmation and all the rest of it, and then you can watch me put the rug out. Hopefully, when the sun comes up and it's spring and it's a bit sunnier in London. And yeah, the rug's going to look great. I've got a spare rug going now if anyone wants it. Ryan, you've just joined us. Sorry, you've missed me talking about winning a bet on DeGale Jack, and that's literally all I've talked about for the past couple of minutes. So you've missed absolutely nothing. In other words, thanks very much for joining us again, mate. You're on mute, by the way, in case you don't realise. But yeah, Rian Scalia has joined us again, everyone. So we are going to pick through. Bloody hell, must have about 30 fights to preview. There's been so much confirmed in the last few days. Ryan, how are you anyway?
Great. I just got home just in time, so we're ready to roll.
Good man. You're dedicated. I like it. What's the time over there? You're on the east side of Canada, aren't you?
No, kind of like Western Central. It's Mountain Time Zone, so it's 1:06 in the afternoon right now.
So what are you, Alberta? No, not Alberta. What's Winnipeg? Is that Winnipeg? Is that in Alberta?
No, that's in Manitoba.
What am I thinking of? So Alberta's what? I thought that was on the eastern sort of half of the country. I'm getting confused. I basically know where Toronto and Quebec are, and then Vancouver, and that's about it.
Yeah, well, that's basically Canada.
Yeah,
that's basically what anyone knows about Canada.
I thought you were in Nova Scotia for some reason. I've no idea why. I think someone must have told me you were way out on the eastern seaboard equivalent. Anyway, enough about that. Before we get cracking, I'll just put out the question for this week's 6 Degrees of Tony Dodson. As people may remember, the other week we had Josh Warrington to, was it Julio Cesar Chavez? I think that was the connection. And you had to do it in less than 5. This week, I've got another decent one. It's Junior Witter, the former British light welterweight champion, to Azuma Nelson, the greatest African fighter of all time. So that's Junior Witter to Azuma Nelson in as few moves as possible. I have managed to do it in 4 moves. So that's the number to beat. If you can do it in 3 or less, and remember, this is going by common opponents. So, you'd pick someone Junior Witter for, and then someone that opponent for, and so on and so forth until you get to Azuma Nelson. And yeah, 4 is the number to beat. So everyone have a go at that for the next hour and a half or so, and then we'll come back to it at the end. Ryan, before you hopped on, I was just briefly talking about DeGale Jack because we hadn't done a show last week. Just very quickly, because I appreciate no one really wants to hear about it anymore. It's all ancient history. I scored it a draw, and I watched it back again, and I had it a draw again the second time I scored it. What was your scorecard, first of all?
I mean, I don't really score fights anymore, just because I'd rather just watch it when it's live. I suppose I could go back and watch it, but just watching it, you kind of get a sense of who wins when you're not scoring it, and I kind of got the sense that Jack won, especially with the big 12th round that he had, and a lot of DeGale's work just seemed pretty ineffective over the course of the fight, and Jack was the stronger guy, just landing the more solid punches, whereas DeGale is flash, and a lot of judges like the flash. So I can see how he can come to a draw. I don't think it's a robbery or anything, and if I scored the fight, I'd probably have it like maybe 1 or 2 points to Jack or something like that. So I mean, I don't think a draw is bad. It's just obviously.
No, I agree. I mean, I've seen a couple of people say it was a robbery. I think they were both. They both thought Jack won it. To be honest, if I had to flip if you put a gun to my head and I have to pick a winner, I'd probably just about go with Jack, because I thought there were a couple of close rounds in the middle of the fight when I may have scored them sort of evenly split between the two, but you could tell that Jack was doing more damage. And like you say, it's what you like, isn't it? I know Steve Farhood had DeGale way ahead after about 9 rounds, because he was obviously scoring the kind of flashy punches rather than the sort of gradual chopping away that Jack was doing. And I know Dan Rayfield had DeGale I think 5 points up going into the final round or something. He had him miles ahead. I mean, I had it where Jack needed the knockdown to get the draw, or he needed to knock DeGale out to get the win, and that turned out to be how 2 of the judges had it. But I don't feel, I really wanted DeGale to win. I don't feel. I mean, I wouldn't have said it was a robbery if Jack had got it by a point or 2. I think if DeGale had won it wide, that would have been unfair. But a draw's fair. I think neither of them deserved to lose, really. I thought both guys fought very admirably and showed a lot of heart. And Jack obviously was a bit bamboozled at the beginning and came back into it. And then DeGale got badly beaten up in the middle rounds, and then obviously had to rally. But it was the same thing we see from Jack every time, right? It was sort of rounds 6 through 10. He just put his foot down, and he seems to do it. He did it against Groves. He did it against. I watched the Anthony Dirrell fight again recently, and that was very close after 5 rounds. Maybe you might have even had Dirrell a point up, and then Jack won 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10, and he really just pulled away. And then you had Dirrell kind of fighting for the knockout to try and win it. In the final 6 minutes, and it seemed pretty similar against. It was very similar against Boutte, I thought, although the cards robbed him. I thought it was the same against Groves, a close first 5 rounds, and then Jack just pulled away. And he obviously does the distance extremely well and manages his stamina. And we can say what we want about Heredia or whatever. I guess the fact is he hasn't failed a test, so we can't criticize him for that. How do you think he'll fare up at light heavyweight? Assuming he does. I mean, he said he's moving, hasn't he? He's vacated the belt already.
I think it could be interesting because there's a lot more heavy hitters there. I mean, Adonis Kovalev, even guys like Joe Smith, like that. I mean, he's been dented before, and now moving up to a weight class with such big hitters, and his tendency to be in in close fights, and he's not that hard to hit. He does keep a nice high guard, but at the end of the day, you're still going to make contact with him. So, I mean, I don't think he'll be like world champion at light heavyweight. The champions are just too strong. Even if like Ward vacates, there's still a bunch of guys in the way. There's a lot of contenders around, so. I'm not.
Yeah, I know what you mean. It's a tough one. I think what was it that they used to say? I remember Chris Eubank once saying that the biggest leap, and I think another British former British guy said it. I think it might have been Joe Calzaghe. It was someone, or maybe Carl Froch. But it was a super middleweight who was saying it, and they said the biggest physical leap in boxing is from middleweight to super middleweight, because at middleweight you get a lot of guys who maybe have come up from sort of welter. You know, you get guys like De La Hoya, you get guys like Cotto, where on the street those guys would still look quite small. Whereas once you get up to 168, they start to be actually just big guys, you know, on the street as well as in the ring. Do you know what I mean? And there seems to be a big, and I know obviously it's a stupid saying because it's an 8-pound jump. There's plenty of divisions with an 8-pound jump or whatever, but that seems to be like a large barrier. You know, it's very unlikely that a guy like Cotto, you know, Cotto who's sort of quite sizable at 154, you know, would look ridiculous at 168. He'd be absolutely dwarfed. And a guy like, you know, even Mayweather, who Floyd could probably get away with a few middleweights, you know, without looking ridiculous. But can you imagine Floyd up against a guy like Jack or a guy like even sort of Callum Smith, who's what, 6'2" or whatever? It's ridiculous. And I think at the moment, there's a huge physical gap between 168 and 175 in terms of just how big the guys look and obviously how hard they punch. Like you said, there's a lot of punchers at light heavyweight, and I struggle to see Jack. I mean, Jack's a good fighter; he's got good defense, but I think he might end up in a situation where an opponent just sort of punches through his guard. Do you know what I mean? Against the bigger guys.
Yeah, the thing about super middleweight is like there's guys coming from 175 and 160 to super middleweight because it's a weaker division in terms of who the champions are. Because like at light heavyweight and middleweight, you have unified champions who happen to be like pound for pound level fighters. So at super middleweight, there's all these belts all over the place. There isn't a truly elite fighter at super middleweight. So it's kind of like, I mean, I like the division a lot because it's action fights and the guys tend to actually fight and, you know, not point scoring and all that stuff. It's kind of like cruiserweight in that type of way. And yeah, because I mean, you have guys like Tyron Zoiga, who's obviously regular champion, but then like even a guy like James DeGale, he's not an elite fighter.
Yeah,
it's like a Kovalev, if you know.
Yeah, exactly. I think you don't have the soft touch champions at super middle that you might get at, like, you know, you don't have the sort of the Liam Smiths that you might get at 154, you know. But equally, you don't have the 5-star truly elite champions either. So you kind of have a situation where all the champions are pretty evenly matched, but they're all maybe 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10 fighters, rather than the Kovalevs or the Wards or the you know, the Mayweathers or the Crawfords. Do you know what I mean? There's no one of that level. I agree with you, and this is coming from someone. I rate James DeGale very highly. I think he's one of my favorite fighters. But I agree with you. He's not quite. He's an A- fighter, I think, rather than a proper sort of 5-star elite champion. Having said that, in a way, it's good because, you know, you don't get these incredibly one-sided title fights generally. DeGale has talked about he wants to fight the winner of Groves versus Chudinov. I mean, Groves and Chudinov, neither of them are that good, but that'll probably be quite a good fight between them. Where there'll be, you know, both guys could hurt the other. Both have got, you know, a bit of power, and then you know, a Groves DeGale rematch, that could be really good. You know, that could be really fun and would probably be reasonably evenly matched. So yeah, you don't. What's the word? The kind of the ceiling is a bit lower, but at the same time, the matchups are generally more even. So it's kind of a double-edged sword, I suppose. Just quickly, because we obviously don't want to spend too much time on it. Davis against Pedraza. I got a bit of shit for picking Pedraza in this one, and I thought he might be able to take Davis into sort of deeper waters second half of the fight and maybe empty the gas tank sort of thing. It looked like he might be on the way to doing that, and then Davis really hurt him in the 6th round, and then obviously stopped him in the 7th. What did you think of Pedraza's tactics? To me, it was very, very strange. He seemed to be just sort of standing in front of him the entire time for a guy that's not a puncher.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, I kind of think he had the right idea, but when he had to get in and then get out, and the problem is he stayed in the whole time, and he just got pounded with Davis's power punches and on the counter. Because I think if he would have tried to sit back and try to jab, Davis is the way faster fighter, and I think he would have got Pedraza would have got countered all day. So I mean, I think he had the right idea trying to drag him to deeper waters, because you saw Davis fighting in spurts, but Pedraza just left himself in the pocket for way too long instead of going to the pocket, getting out, and repeating. He just left himself in danger for far too long, because at a certain point in the fight, I thought, wow, Pedraza's turning it around. He's starting to wear him down. When he was doing the woo thing.
Yeah,
And
that was the 5th round, wasn't it? And I thought Davis had completely run out of gas for a minute. But I think he just took the round off, didn't he, in hindsight?
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a strange one. Davis reminds me a bit of Broner, not in terms of his personality or anything, just in terms of he's got very fast hands and very fast combinations, but he tends to, there's no kind of steady output. He won't throw a thing for 30 seconds, and then he'll throw 15 punches in 5 seconds. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And he kind of fights in bursts, and you think that if there's an opponent who can sort of make him fight at a higher pace, he might sort of be exposed a little bit. But having said that, I've also been told I've been too negative and sort of too harsh on him, because I know a lot of people were really impressed. And look, Pedraza's not elite, as we were saying before, but he's a pretty good champion, and he got very badly beaten up. He's never been beaten up like that before, whatever you think of his past fights. So yeah, hats off to Davis. Floyd's already said he doesn't want to put him in with Lomachenko. I can't blame him, to be perfectly honest. I don't know who would you like to see Davis in with, sort of realistically, in the next year or so?
Well, I mean, I imagine they're not going to put him in with anyone too good, because he's 22, and obviously there's politics involved here, where a lot of guys are on the other side of the street. I think him versus Jason Sosa would be a really, really good fight. I know Sosa is the regular champion, so that wouldn't really work that well. But
that would be action, wouldn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah, actually, his mandatory is Liam Walsh, which is a decent fight.
It's a good fight. That I put a poll up about who people would favour, and got about 90% picking Davis. But I think it's a bit closer than that. I'm not saying I think Walsh would win, but I think that's a decent fight. And who's the other one? I mean, I think he'd lose, but someone like Javier Fortuna against Davis, that could be action for 5 or 6 rounds. I think Fortuna would probably get knocked out, but that could be a really fun fight. 130 is very quietly turning into a really, really good division, I think. Again, maybe you've only got the one truly elite fighter in there, but you've got lots of guys who can give you action. And yeah, like you say, a lot of sort of well-matched 60-40, 50-50 type fights at the top end. Last one was, just wanted to mention it, Evgen Khitrov getting knocked out by Aleem. Aleem's Canadian, isn't he? Or is he based in Canada? Or
no, he's from Maryland, I believe.
Oh, is he really? So I misread it again. My Canadian geography is abysmal. For some reason, I thought it said he was fighting out Toronto for some reason. But yeah, no, that was a bit of a surprise. I said at the time, I did think Khitrov was sort of going to lose sooner rather than later, because I'd seen him struggle and get hit quite a lot. But I had no idea. I'd never seen Aleem before. He didn't look like much of a puncher. So really, I didn't sort of make a prediction either way. But he looked awful. I mean, he got hurt with the first punch that landed. Pretty much, it was shocking.
Yeah, I mean, Khitrov just had no reflexes. He couldn't get out of the way of anything, and I think the first half. So I think Khitrov has had like 15 fights now. He's 14-1, if I'm correct. And so his first 7 fights, like, he looked like $1 million in those fights. And he was beating some pretty decent guys in those first 7 fights.
Yeah, he was moved quite quickly, wasn't he? And I remember seeing him on Showbox maybe about 18 months ago. And then I saw him. He fought that Jorge Melendez, who
Yeah,
Jason Quigley knocked out the other month. And
yeah,
Melendez is really a light middleweight, and Khitrov was much bigger than him. And Melendez hit him. Khitrov stopped him after about 7 rounds or something. But Melendez was hitting him quite a lot. And I remember
yeah.
thinking, okay, I've seen guys beat Melendez a lot easier than this, and it seems like Khitrov was sort of making a bit of hard work of it. And I mean, I don't know. Is it a case of he sort of found his level? I mean, he's still a fun fighter. You know, I'd still watch him. I'd still watch him against maybe as a sort of fringe contender, but it doesn't look good in terms of he was quite close to getting the Golovkin fight, I think, and you know, you worry about what would have happened if that fight had gone through.
Well, I think this is kind of a theory, but he had 500 amateur fights. And when you have an aggressive style like this, without much defense, and you keep getting hit in the head over and over, you're going to deteriorate eventually. And he's 28, but by the time he was 24, he'd had 500 amateur fights. So
Yeah,
that's a lot of wear and tear. And you know, like I said, how he looked like $1 million during the first 7 fights of his career. Well, the second half of those first 14 fights he had, he was going much longer rounds, and his power didn't seem to be as good. Now, granted, he was fighting, you know, better guys in some cases, but I mean, he knocked out a Lewis Rose in the first round, but it's taking him 8 rounds to stop. And then against Paul Mendes, like he just pounded and pounded and pounded him, and it took forever to stop him to like the 9th round or something. But he's looked slower and
yeah, I agree with that.
and he obviously that means he's getting hit more during the past 7 fights before this one. So I don't know if it's a case of wear and tear, or if you know we were all hoodwinked by the first 7 fights.
Yeah, I mean, possibly you kind of tend to assume if guys are repeatedly shown on TV that they must be pretty good, when in reality, you know, we know that it can be a sort of media creation to an extent. The guy that springs to mind for me is Red Catch, who's fighting at the weekend, where you know, I've heard it on sort of the authority of various people behind the scenes that he's a guy who really sort of left his prime in sparring and in the gym.
Yeah.
And it could be the same thing with Khitrov, where he's kind of, his best days were sort of beaten out of him in the amateurs, because yeah, like you say, there's a difference between having 500 fights if you're Rigondeaux and having 500 fights if you're fighting like Angulo. Do you know what I mean? It's a lot. It's a bit of a difference in terms of the damage you're taking. And obviously Lomachenko had, I mean, how much did he have? 350 or something like that amateur fights?
Just about 400.
Yeah, about 400. But again, a guy who wasn't taking much damage and was sort of. Whereas if you think sort of, I always think, imagine if a guy like Salido had an extensive amateur background, it'd be, I mean, he might fight differently, but you know, with that sort of style, it's amazing. It's amazing when you think how he's still going from strength to strength. But we'll get onto the 130s again at the end of the show. That was all I wanted to do on the reviews, really. I mean, in terms of, before we get onto the previews, because it is a big weekend coming up, I thought we could just go through a few news items. I'm going to try and I was listening back to the show a few days ago, the show we did 2 weeks back, and we don't really disagree on very much. So I'm going to try and disagree with you a bit more to get some talking points going. So let's start off with a controversial one. Khan against Brook. Obviously, that's all been in the been in the news again this week in terms of I think Brook's got to make his mind up about Errol Spence pretty quickly. But Khan doesn't seem to have any inclination to fight him. Eddie Hearns said that they won't take the fight if the offer is 70-30. I've also heard people at Matchroom say that they want a 50-50 split. What's your thoughts on sort of what's fair for this one? Because I mean, I suppose you're a bit more distance to it. In the UK, I can tell you, sort of being a person on the street in Britain, Khan is much more famous, a far bigger name, and he would very much be the A side if the fight did happen.
Well, I think 60-40 in Khan's favor seems proper. I mean, you know, Obviously, Kell Brook is the champion, but really in a fight, it's about who's the draw and who's the bigger name. And
Yeah, they're
you
fighting for
know,
money, aren't they? They're not fighting for
yeah,
glory. I mean,
right.
a beating Khan doesn't really do that much for Kell Brook's resume, I don't think, at this stage. Especially beating a Khan who's coming off a knockout loss and who hasn't fought much. It's a stadium fight that's going to make both guys a lot of money. I think Khan. The issue is that Khan doesn't necessarily need the money. I think
Right.
he has done very well. He's been making $1 million purses since his sort of 7th or 8th fight, whereas Brook probably only in the last 2 or 3 years has of a 12-year career has started to make the really big money. So you think 60-40 is fair? I'll ask you this: do you think Brook is ducking Spence?
Well, I think Eddie Hearn wants no part of Errol Spence because the risk greatly outweighs the potential reward. And we all know Kell kills himself to make 147, but who exactly is he going to fight at 154? He's going to try to get an old Miguel Cotto. That's probably what they want to do. I mean,
would Cotto take that? I mean, assuming let's say Cotto knocks Kirkland out and looks quite good, he'll want to go back to pay-per-view, won't he? And sort of Kell Brook's not a pay-per-view name in the States. I mean,
right.
If I'm Cotto and I beat Kirkland well, I'm going for the Canelo rematch, I reckon, probably. That's about the only one where he could sort of justify his $10 million guarantee or whatever. I mean, there's no way a Brook fight would make that much money. I mean, could you maybe, I don't know, drag Tim Bradley up to 154? He's talked about going up there before. Could you?
Well, yeah, I could see Cotto fighting Bradley, but
yeah, well, that was talked about, wasn't it? I think last year.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not terrible. Those guys are about the same size, aren't they? I don't hate that fight necessarily. I mean, realistically, who could Brook fight at 154? Maybe. I mean, I would have said Liam Smith, but obviously he's fighting Liam Williams in a fight that he could easily lose. And that's a pretty close to a 50-50, I'd say.
It could be for the vacant WBO as well. So
yeah, I've heard the rumor. Yeah, I don't know about that, but I mean, Brook versus Liam Smith is a big fight, but that's not a stadium fight in the UK. That wouldn't give Brook the sort of money he got against Golovkin. And there really aren't that many at 154 in the UK. I mean, what can you do? You boil Andy Lee down? You boil Billy Joe Saunders down? I don't know. There's not a lot of options, and we've seen that he's not a middleweight. He's said it himself now. And to be honest, I think it's a bit overplayed because he does struggle up to an extent to make 147, but equally, he's only ever blown the weight once, and that was a long time ago. And I think that was much more a case of him sort of being unprofessional in terms of his training, rather than him genuinely struggling and sort of being too big for it. If they made the Spence fight, I would be very confident Brook could make 147. I mean, to me, Spence looks even bigger than him, but obviously he's a lot younger. He can get rid of the weight a bit easier. Do you have any sympathy with Hearn in terms of the Spence situation? Because I can see where he's coming from. If Brook beat Spence, he probably wouldn't get that much credit because people would say Spence was an unproven prospect, wouldn't they?
Mm-hmm. I think you get a lot of credit because everyone thinks Spence is the best thing since sliced bread. So, I mean, it's a really dangerous fight, and if they lose, then they're kind of screwed. But if they don't take the fight, then they're kind of stuck because unless the Khan fight happens, then and Khan probably knows this. Khan has a lot of
he does know
Khan
it.
has a lot of leverage here,
Yeah.
so that's one of the reasons why this is these negotiations are being difficult. I mean, they're just going to look bad either way if they don't take this Spence fight.
I think Khan has got to the point in his career where he doesn't need to sort of prove himself, or in his own mind, he doesn't need to prove himself to the fans. He's got enough money. Him and Brook genuinely don't like each other. And I think that's maybe what's preventing it, because Brook probably knows that he will have to sort of give in to Khan's demands because Khan has all the leverage. He doesn't want the IBF belt. He doesn't care about it. What's Khan going to do? Beat Brook, get the IBF belt, and then fight Spence? He'd probably vacate it. I doubt he'd ever fight. let alone sort of go into a serious campaign at 147 again. I think there's more chance of Khan retiring than ever sort of coming back to that proper contender level. Yeah, it's a strange one. I'm inclined to give Brook the benefit of the doubt, maybe give him another month. But if he goes up to 154 and fights some, vacates his belt and then fights some nobody, then I think it's a duck. And equally, obviously, if he vacates the belt and then stays at 147, then that's clearly a duck, because he'll be giving Spence a free shot at the title. I don't know who the number 3 ranked is for the IBF. I don't know who Spence would fight if it did become vacant. I'm actually going to look this up.
Jeff Horn is somewhere around there, but he's going the WBO route, obviously.
I'm just getting the IBF website up now. Who have we got? Right. Division. Okay. These sanctioning body websites are awful. Seriously, they spend no money on them. We've got Jeff Horn, we've got Berto, Bradley Skeet, and then that Ponomarev who fought. Did he fight Shane Mosley, or is that someone else? Anyway, no. I think I've seen him before. So that's a pretty weak top 5. Obviously, Spence will be massively favoured over all of those. So yeah, we might end up getting, I don't know, Berto versus Spence for the vacant belt, something like that. Could see that happening. Hopefully it doesn't. I'd really like to see Brook versus Spence. I think it's a very, very. I'd make it almost a 50-50.
I think Brook would win.
I think he's being written off. I've seen a lot of people say he's got no chance, and I think that's a big mistake. I think
because you know what, Kell Brook does very well against southpaws.
And Brook is much better than anyone Spence has fought before. Like a huge step up. Very accurate with the uppercuts when Spence is sort of winging away on the inside. I think Brook's a good counter puncher. I think he's a harder puncher than anyone Spence has faced before. Whereas I think obviously Brook's fought harder punchers than Spence, certainly. It might be the uppercuts against the body shots. I do think Spence could potentially hurt him to the body, but we'll see about that one. The other fight that's being rumoured this week is, and forgive me for the pronunciation, it was Wilder's opponent got popped for drugs, didn't he? I think yesterday. Is that Wolodarski, or I forget how you pronounce the surname? Yeah. Oh, yeah. The Polish guy, I'm presuming, with that name. So he's out. They're now talking about. I've heard 2 rumours today. I've heard that Wilder versus Hughie Fury is on potential, but I've also heard Wilder versus Gerald Washington. And then I also read today that Fury and Joseph Parker has been ordered to go to purse bids. So it seems like Hughie Fury's a man in demand all of a sudden. I don't know. Would you have any thoughts on any of those? Who would you like to see Wilder in with next?
Well, I imagine it's going to be Gerald Washington because it's in-house, and
that makes sense, doesn't it?
And he was scheduled to fight on this card. Yeah. I'm pretty sure. So,
and it's a fairly safe win, isn't it, for Wilder?
Yeah, I mean, he's still undefeated, I guess. Even though everybody knows he's not that great, but
no,
whatever. It's an undefeated American heavyweight. I mean, as far as other options go, there's like Andriy Rudenko or someone like that. Yeah. But the positive test is actually a positive because it's hard to be worse than Vavrzik was.
Yeah. What did he actually? For anyone who hasn't sort of followed up on this, what did he actually test for?
I think it was stanozolol.
No,
not 100% on that, but I think I read it on Twitter.
Who is? And I'm trying to think. Someone else got popped for that recently.
Kid Galahad.
Galahad, yes, that was it. And that's the muscle builder, isn't it? Where there's just absolutely no excuse for for taking that other than to gain an illegal advantage. Does it say yes? Yeah, stanozolol metabolites, according to Jose Suleiman. Yeah, so that's about as clear cut as it gets. So that's a shame. Obviously, you feel for Wilder a bit because he's had 2. I mean, respect to the guy. I'm not sure he would have won, but he was prepared to go to Russia and fight Povetkin, and then obviously the rug got pulled out from under that. Bit of a shame.
Yeah, I mean, you can't really fault Wilder with anything here. And especially because this is his fight coming off of the surgeries. So
Yeah,
this is like a pure tune-up fight. Like he even said himself, I want to test out my injuries.
yeah, yeah. And from what I'd heard, they were actually, it was a proper injury. It wasn't a sort of a Canelo, oh, I've injured my hand, we need to delay the Golovkin fight by another 6 months. It was a genuine muscle tear or whatever. I mean, the one that makes complete sense to me is Parker versus Wilder. I think that suits both parties, and that fight should definitely happen. Hopefully later this year. I mean, do you have any thoughts on Hughie Fury against Parker? Again, that sort of makes sense for both. I think it's a fairly safe opponent for Parker. I think Hughie Fury will have to do very well to get a decision down in New Zealand. Not overly happy about him fighting for a title, having sort of done nothing for the last year, and if the rumours are to be believed, potentially have been serving time out from the sport. But what do you think of that one, Fury against Parker?
Well, it kind of sounds like it might end up in Manchester. Because I don't know, Frank with his BT money, we'll see what happens. But I don't really get throwing Hughie Fury into this fight when he's been out since April with his skin condition again.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why you'd throw him into a fight of this magnitude after he's been out so long with the same health issues that have been plaguing him for a long time, and especially because he's only 22.
Yeah, it seems strange to rush him, but maybe it's a case of they feel Parker's vulnerable and they like the fight. I mean, Parker didn't look that good against Ruiz, did he? We talked about this on our first pod. Well, a couple of weeks back or whatever. That Parker was a bit sluggish and a bit heavy, and maybe I don't know. Maybe they feel like now's the time to do it. But I can't complain. It's two undefeated heavyweights fighting against each other. Can't really turn your nose up, but it's a strange one. On that, I guess we'll see how it plays out. It has been ordered to go to purse bids, and like you say, if Warren's got big pools of money now, then that could potentially get brought over to Manchester. Although I think they'll have to pay Parker a lot to get him to leave New Zealand. He's on pay-per-view over there, isn't he? Every fight. So I'm not sure about.
I'm not sure that his purses are actually that big over there. Because you remember Duco almost cost themselves the Ruiz fight when they didn't get the government funding. That fight in December. So I'm not sure that his purses are actually all that big. He does have Burger King and a few sponsors, and I don't know how many people actually buy the pay-per-view over there. It's really expensive, like it is in the US.
Well, you imagine it. I mean, what's the population in New Zealand? God, it's like 1.5 million or something like that. I mean, you'd imagine he'd do very well to sell sort of 100,000 pay-per-views. Significantly less than that. What's the population of New Zealand? Let me get it up now.
I think it's 3.5 million.
It's actually a lot higher than I would have thought. It's almost 5 million. It's 4.75 million.
Oh, wow.
So you think maybe that's actually quite a lot, considering it's a very, very small land mass. I'm really surprised at that. Okay, so yeah, 5 million people in New Zealand, and maybe he might sell 100,000, maybe a couple of 100,000, which is pretty good for the size. But yeah, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, and whether this Warren thing is all smoke and mirrors, or I haven't really been keeping up on the BT stuff. I'm sort of waiting until something concrete gets announced before I get my hopes up. I've got a few more to discuss. I've put a note to myself here saying PBC resurgence, because it seems like they've been really stepping, or sort of the Heyman stable have really been stepping up in terms of their matchmaking, whether it's on PBC or whether it's on MSNBC, or what was Garcia Thurman's airing on network
CBS.
TV, isn't it? CBS. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's the equivalent of us getting a show on sort of regular ITV over here, which really doesn't happen very often, let alone for a fight like that. I think that's brilliant. Huge audience, and the fighters seem happy to sort of. Well, Thurman especially seems happy to be given a bigger platform rather than sticking things on pay-per-view. If anyone hasn't seen it, there's a good clip of Thurman reacting to a fan telling him that the fight should have been on pay-per-view, and him saying that he doesn't agree with pay-per-view and would much rather fight for a bigger audience and all the rest of it, which is if you take him at his word, it's great to hear that sort of attitude. But I'll just reel off some fights that have been announced in the last few days, and just jump in and interrupt me if there's any that you particularly like. We've got Jarrett Hurd against Tony Harrison, which is 154 eliminator, I think. We've had Thomas Williams Jr. against Marcus Brown. Could be a proper action fight, that one. I think that's at light heavyweight. So again, fringe contenders. We've obviously got Wilder against Washington potentially getting announced. And then we've had the Broner versus Granados has been finalized. And then obviously we've got the big card this weekend. I mean, I really like Hurd against Harrison. Hurd's a guy who's really sort of come from obscurity in the last year or so and notched up a couple of very good wins, and very tall guy at the weight. Looks similar sort of body to Jamal Charlo, the bigger of the two Charlos. Very long arms, gets a lot of leverage on his punches, huge uppercuts. And obviously Tony Harrison has been stopped before, but he's a guy who's got good power, very flashy, throws very fast combinations. That could be a really good fight. And then Brown versus Williams Jr. in a sort of eliminator, the type of eliminator we never really see in other divisions. I think that was announced on the same day as Barrera versus Beterbiev, both at light heavyweight, which are both fantastic sort of. They're not fringe contenders, but they're guys who are ranked between sort of 5 and 10 in the division. Those kind of knockout fights where the winner will have genuinely earned a shot at the title. But I don't know what your thoughts on any of those were. Is there any that particularly stand out?
I thought one was interesting. David Avanesian against Lamont Peterson. Peterson, I don't think he's fought since October of 2015. And this is
Diaz, wasn't it? That last one.
Yeah, and this is at the full welterweight limit. So that could be an interesting fight. I imagine it'll be pretty competitive. I just think there's going to be a lot of exchanges and a lot of body shots back and forth. As for Barrera Beterbiev, I think if they don't come to a deal, it's going to go to purse bid, and I don't imagine Yvon Michel will lose the purse bid. So I think he'll win it, and maybe
you have to favor Beterbiev over Barrera, don't you? In Montreal,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I don't think Barrera is allowed to enter Canada. So
how come?
I don't know. He said in the past when he's tried to negotiate fights with some Canadian guys that he can't get into Canada. So it's something to do with him being a Cuban
exile. Yeah. Okay, interesting. Well, I guess maybe they'll have to do it in I don't know, Boston or somewhere reasonably near the border. Maybe Portland or somewhere like that, or Seattle.
I'd like to see it if Adonis Stevenson against Joe Smith Jr. happens. I'd like to see it on that card because that'd be in New York.
Oh, has that been? Oh, right. Again, I just assumed that would be in Stevenson's backyard, but I guess that would draw a crowd, wouldn't it? Joe Smith's sort of building a bit of a sort of cult following. Get someone like Shawnee Monaghan on the undercard against. He's a light heavyweight, isn't he, Monaghan? Why can't he? Hopefully, he can fight someone half decent at some point. I mean, he seems to be a guy who's sort of perennial sort of fighting guys who are ranked sort of 30, 35, 40. He never seems to go above that. I don't think he's fought a single top 20 guy yet, but I don't know. Stick the winner of Beterbiev Barrera in with Monaghan and stick that on in Boston and get a good crowd.
Beterbiev Barrera is a final eliminator for the IBF.
Which is Kovalev's got the IBF, hasn't he?
No, Ward has it now.
Oh yeah, of course. Sorry, that shows how much I think of that decision. Okay, well, that'll be interesting. I think those belts might get split up, sadly, because I'm not sure Ward will want to be dictated to.
Right.
And then just a couple of other British fights that we've had come through, literally sort of today and yesterday. I don't know if you saw. I think Liam Smith against Leah Williams was confirmed for April yesterday. Again, you mentioned it earlier. Not sure if that's going to be for the vacant WBO belt, which Canelo is presumably going to give up now that he's moving up to Canelo weight 164 pounds or whatever for the Chavez fight, which we might mention later if you can stand it. But yeah, Williams versus Smith. I mean, both are, I think, ranked in the top 5 with the WBO. Pretty good fight. Who do you like in that one? Have you seen much of Liam Williams?
I think Liam Williams will edge it out. I think it's going to be a really close fight. A lot of action, because they're both fairly, high guard, get up close and throw type of fighters. And I think Williams is the more rough and tough of them. So I think he might be able to edge it out, even though it's pretty early in his career, but they had the confidence to take the fight. So I think, they believe that they're ready for it.
Yeah, I think there's this sort of they've got a bit of history, the two of them, because a few, what was it, probably 2 years ago or so, when Liam Smith was British champion, you have to make the 5 defenses to keep the belt outright. Smith had 4, and then his 5th opponent was Liam Williams, was the mandatory. And I think that the Williams camp sort of delayed that fight because they felt that Williams, who was, he was probably 20 at the time or 21, and they just felt it was a bit too soon for him, quite understandably. And then eventually, I think Smith sort of couldn't get the opponent, so he had to move on, and he went the European route, and then obviously ultimately fought for the WBO belt. And I think he claims to be a bit resentful because, as he puts it, Liam Williams sort of blocked him from getting to keep the British title outright. And Liam Williams is obviously saying that now he's ready and he's going to shut him up. But like you say, he's still pretty young and could sort of, although I do think Williams has been matched very well in the last sort of 18 months. I think he's seen a lot of different styles. He's had a few really tough fights that he would have learned a lot from. And I see his jab as being quite a lot better than Liam Smith's. And someone pointed out, I thought quite astutely on Twitter the other day, that Liam Smith has the type of style where fighters just fall off a cliff. Do you know what I mean? Like one day you just can't do it anymore, and then as soon as sort of the physical aspects of that style start to deteriorate, it's a bit like Juan Diaz. One day it just went, and then he just couldn't do it anymore at all. And I think I know Smith's not exactly the same as Juan Diaz in his style, but I think there's a similarity in the sense that Smith absorbs a lot of shots on his shoulders and his arms, and he comes forward and he throws a lot up close. And that's the kind of style where once it's a bit of a sort of Michael Katsidis, all offense style, where I think once his sort of body's taken a bit too much damage or his chin's been cracked, it's never quite the same, and he doesn't have the boxing skills to fall back on. And I'm not saying Williams is a boxer, but I do think Williams I think his footwork's a bit better, and I think he's got a better jab. But I look forward to that one. I think it's pretty much a 50-50, and I could see both. Apparently, Mikey Garcia's just called me a 4-letter word. Oh, it's all the guys, Brian and all the rest of them. They're all off in New York for the.
I just saw the tweet.
Nice. They're watching the workouts, the media workouts. It's a shame. It's the sort of fight I would have loved to have gone to, but it's a bit too soon after Christmas. Sadly, I've blown all my money. But yeah, we'll get onto that in a moment. A few others that I know you're very keen on. Well, I was going to go on to Huck versus Briedis because I know you love that fight. But before we do that, announced about 2 hours ago was Sam Eggington defending his WBC international title against Paulie Malignaggi. I think this has the potential to be an absolute stinker. Some people are saying this is going to be the co-feature for the Klitschko Joshua pay-per-view, and I think as a pay-per-view co-main event, this could be ugly. Have you got any thoughts on this fight at all? I really don't have any interest in Paulie as a fighter anymore. I wish he'd retire. I don't think he can't need the money. He must get paid very well by Showtime.
Well, he doesn't. He's even said he doesn't need the money and all that. And he even says, like, I don't get it. He's like, I know I shouldn't really be fighting anymore, but I can't stop. And he wants to stop this year. So I mean, this fight is. It's kind of like what I would call like a novelty name fight, more so for casuals, because Paulie Malignaggi, he's the name guy, and then you have the matchroom boy Sam Eggington, the Brit, and it's just kind of one of those fights. As far as like actual significance, it doesn't mean much at all. There's a WBC international or whatever belt on the line.
Well, yeah, Eggington is quite well ranked by the WBC. I think he's like number 6 or 7. So he's obviously got a ranking to protect. Do you think there's an argument that a guy like Eggington, who, again, I don't know how much you've seen of him, sort of, if you've seen as much as the British fans, he's been on Sky quite a lot in the last 2 years. He's obviously struggled in the past with boxers. Obviously, overcame that to an extent when he knocked out Frankie Gavin, but Gavin wasn't boxing that night because he was in such poor shape. He was just sort of stood still right in front of Eggington. Do you think there's an argument that a Paulie, who's pushing, how old's Paulie now? He must be what, 36, 37, something like that. He's 36, Paulie. A 36-year-old Malignaggi who really presents no danger. Is there a good argument that this is a kind of a safe environment to learn for Eggington? Do you know what I mean? Do you think he'll learn anything from this? Do you think he might be able to deal with boxers a bit better after this fight? Do you think he'll get anything out of it?
Yeah, I mean, I imagine at certain points during the fight, he's probably going to look pretty stupid. Just with facing a boxer like Malignaggi. But I think part of the main difference here is going to be that Skeet is just a lot taller than Paulie, and that threw Eggington off even more. And so against a shorter type guy like Paulie, I think Eggington will be able to cover more ground and get a bit closer to him. But
yeah,
there's gonna be moments where Eggington looks like a fool.
But yeah, and let's be real, Paulie's legs aren't what they were, are they? A few years ago when he was. I watched the just before Christmas. Very sad, but for some reason I watched the Senchenko fight again, and Paulie was, even back then. I mean, that was Paulie past his best, but his footwork was excellent in that fight. But he stands still a lot now, and I think. Do you expect a stoppage, or do you think Paulie's got a good enough chin to go the distance?
I think it's going to go the distance, but by the end of the fight, Paulie's going to be taking a bunch of unnecessary shots, more than he really needs to be taking, and it'll maybe turn one-sided by the end of it.
Yeah, I think I could see a wide sort of Eggington decision where Malignaggi's maybe frustrates him, but never really does enough to win a round. I know what you mean. That's reminded me. I want to watch the Agogo fight again, where his eye gets busted up. The Eggington Gavin card reminded me of that. Right. So yeah. So that's the British stuff done. Now we'll get on to the really fun stuff, because I know you very keen on Huck versus Briedis, which has been signed for April. Is it? I think for the WBC. April 1st for the WBC. Is it for the title, or is it the interim?
Interim.
Yeah.
Interim.
So Bellew, in theory, will have to fight the winner. Not sure I can see that happening.
No, I don't think so.
Because to be honest, I can see Bellew retiring if he gets a bad knockout against Hay. I can see him taking the money and just leaving, because he's done what he says himself. He's achieved his dream. He's done what he set out to do. I mean, you can't. It's very, very hard to begrudge Briedis a shot. He's been waiting patiently for it seems like forever now. It must be about a year, right? He's been sort of right up in the mandatory positions.
Yeah, I think it was when he beat Duradola that he got it. And the thing is, I see a lot of people that think Briedis is just going to slaughter Huck. I'm not so sure about that. Even though, I mean, if you just watch Marco Huck and you haven't seen him before, you think this guy's a caveman. Not really, doesn't really have a lot of skills, but he just makes every single fight drag it out, really ugly dogfight. And again in the Duradola fight, you saw early on, Duradola was backing him up and really unloading quite a bit, and Briedis didn't look that comfortable. So, and plus Briedis is a slow starter. So I think if Huck can try to mug him and get up close to him and make it really ugly, I could see Huck having a lot of success. But then again, Briedis has really sharp punching and can counter quite well. So I think it's a really even fight.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Genuine disagreement now, not just for pantomime. I'm not sure I think Briedis should win quite well and should stop Huck if he's if he's as good as we think he is. I think Huck is significantly on the downside now, and has, like you say, the caveman style. You can only do that for so long. Great fighter though in his day. Like I don't really want to see him get bashed up, but I think I'll be tempted to bet the Briedis knockout in this one. A couple of others that have just been sort of announced, and again, talk about them, sort of jump in and interrupt me if they interest you at all. We've had Carlos Cuadras against Carmona confirmed for the Jacobs Golovkin undercard, I believe. So that will presumably be on before Chocolatito.
Yeah.
To set up the rematch, no problem with that. Don't mind the rematch at all. I wouldn't turn down a unification, but equally, if we can't get a unification, Cuadras is a very worthy challenger. I'm trying to think if I've seen Carmona before. I'm not sure if I have.
Yeah, he fought Naoya Inoue.
When? Recently?
Yeah, it was pretty recently. It was maybe a year and a half ago.
Oh, last summer. And yeah, it says. Okay.
He took him the distance.
Okay.
But at the same time, he was also stopped by Omar Narvaez, I believe, who it really isn't known for his power at all. So it probably goes to show that Carmona's improved quite a bit to be able to go from getting stopped by Narvaez.
That's a shocker. You get knocked out by Narvaez, and then you can take Inoue's power for 12 rounds or whatever. That's a very surprising, but I mean, he's a decent contender. I don't have a problem with it. Cuadras can sort of tick over while Gonzalez gets the mandatory out the way. In terms of, I've read that Chocolatito's had a change of trainer recently. Do you know anything about that?
Well, his trainer died, so
yeah,
I think his dad's training him now. I'm not 100% sure about that, but at this point, I don't think Chocolatito is really going to change anything in how he fights. I think he is the way he is, and he's been doing what he's been doing for so long that I don't think he's really going to, make any adjustments now or anything. I think he's just going to keep doing the same thing. But at the same time, I think it's possible. Actually, I think it's probable that he's peaked, and that this is, the highest weight class he can really, be an elite fighter at. And
I think
really
definitely. I wouldn't want to see him go up again. I mean, to me, he seemed not worse, but he seemed disadvantaged at Superfly. He is Superfly, isn't he? I always get. Okay. Yeah. Sorry, I was going mad for a second there. Yeah, I think at Superfly, it's harder going for him. Not necessarily because the opponents are more skilled or anything, just because his advantages are less and less. And I wouldn't. It's a bit like Rigondeaux. I don't want to see Rigo up at 126. I don't think he's got any business at 126. Just as I wouldn't want to see Lomachenko up at 147. And I don't want to see what's his name? I don't want to see Gonzalez up at like bantamweight or anything stupid like that. I think it's way too high for him. And 3 weight classes is more than enough to be the lineal champion. I think I'm right in saying he's been lineal in all 3. Yeah,
I'm not
right?
sure.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Sure. He was at flyweight.
Yeah, but yeah. So we'll see about that. It's looking like a decent undercard. I think is the Curtis Stevens fight. Stevens against Lemieux, is that on? No, that's on HBO, isn't it? It's not on the pay-per-view.
Yeah, it's the week before.
Do you know what? I watched the. I think Lemieux will win that very well. I think he could get rid of Stevens quite early on in that fight, or else give him a real beating. Because I watched the De La Rosa fight for the first time last week. I wasn't impressed with Stevens at all. I thought, and I know he hurt his hand, but De La Rosa's not very good, and he almost won. It was, 1 round away from winning. I thought the cards were way too wide. I'm not convinced by this Curtis Stevens revival at all.
Yeah, he's never really been a top fighter. He's kind of just been a name guy that hangs around the fringes of the upper echelon, and kind of gets fights because of that and because he's a puncher. But
he's a gatekeeper, isn't he? I mean, people think a gatekeeper is kind of something that you describe bad fighters as, but you can be a very high level gatekeeper. And I would say Stevens is the type of guy you need to get through him if you're going to fight at proper world title level. And a guy like Toriano Johnson wasn't able to get through him, whatever you think of the stoppage, which shows that he's maybe a level below a guy like Golovkin, who had no problems, or a guy like Hassam Endam, who again didn't really have any problems with Stevens, was able to quite easily beat him. I think Lemieux is a level above Stevens, and he'll win well. But it'll be fun. They can both punch, and it will be bombs away. And Lemieux just basically stands square up and throws hooks. I don't want to say anything bad because I know he's the pride of Canada, and you're very patriotic. But yeah, I like Lemieux. I want to see more of him. I think he's the type of fighter who deserves to be on HBO. I think, look, it's a bit like Rosado. Just keep sticking him on. I don't care if he's got 10 losses or whatever. He makes 99% of the time he's in good fights, and that's enough. That's Stevens versus Lemieux. It is what it is. It doesn't need to be an eliminator. It doesn't need to have some stupid fake silver belt on the line. It's a good fight. It's almost guaranteed action. And yeah, if I was American, I'm getting it on Box Nation. If I was American, I'd be very happy for my HBO fee to go towards fights like that. Just one other one. Actually, no, two more very quickly news items before we move on to the previews, because we have got a fair bit to get through on those. I noticed that your old friend Tony Yoka, the gold medalist heavyweight from the Olympics in Brazil, has turned professional. Have you got any details about that? I've just seen the headline, really.
Well, yeah, I have a lot of details about that. I mean, so first of all, I've always thought Yoka was overrated. As far as people comparing him to Joshua, I don't think he's anywhere near as good. I mean, he got a lot of fortunate decisions, both in the World Championships in 2015 and in the Olympics this year, which almost seemed borderline suspect. And whenever he's fought past 3 rounds, like in World Series of Boxing or AIBA Pro Boxing, his stamina's been bad after 3 rounds. He moves way too much. He's not going to be able to move like that in the pros. And he's been knocked out a few times. One time was by Arislandi Savon, like back in 2011. Fair play, he was 19 years old. But then in, I believe it was 2015, he got knocked out by Ali Eren Demirzen, a Turk who's who was an Olympian this year and then turned pro, and he's 2-0 now. But he's generally like a kind of, slow pressure fighter, kind of like Sinan Shamil Sam, but a bit not quite that level probably. And I don't know, he's not really a power type of guy, like most heavyweights are. He's a boxer, and that's kind of why the judges like him so much, because he shoe shines and stuff like that. He's got fast hands, he's got good footwork, he moves well. But as far as being cut out for the pros, I think it's yet to be seen, because based on his track record in fights which are more like pro fights, like WSP, for example, it's not that good. I think he has a losing record in those fights. So I think for me, at least, he's got a lot to prove. But the thing about him is, like, I imagine he got at least $1 million signing bonus. If you're a promoter, like, even if you don't think he's going to be the heavyweight world champ, or you think you can protect him to a world title, like they did with Joshua, then he's still a massive business. Like, he's a superstar in France. Like, he'll fill an arena fighting like nobody. So
yeah, and he's very marketable, isn't he? And he's a sort of from what they kept saying in the Olympics, he was a very sort of polite, well-spoken guy, and he was like sort of had the famous girlfriend. Wasn't his fiance or his wife or something was also an Olympian? Something.
Yeah,
like
she was a gold medalist boxer.
Okay, well, there you go. That's stick her on the undercard or something, I suppose. But it seems like it's a bit like Joshua. The story's already written. But I think you make a really good point about his style not necessarily translating, because yeah, I noticed in the Olympics he was moving a lot, and I've never seen a heavyweight who could move like that for 12 rounds. You know, not even a guy like Ali could move to that extent for the entire fight. I mean, it's okay over 3 rounds, but I remember in the fight against in the final against Joyce, he got sort of buzzed up in the first round, and I thought quite visibly hurt. And then obviously the judges gave him the round anyway.
Oh yeah, you know, in 2015 at the World Championships, Joyce wobbled him really badly, and you know, I thought Joyce won that time also. So,
well, I was watching with a friend of mine, and I've been sort of the Olympic final, I mean, and I was sort of grumbling about the decisions, and I said that because you've been talking about it the entire week, and you said, look, Yoka's the judge's favorite here. And who, if anyone's going to beat Yoka, they're going to need to absolutely dominate him. And it seemed like Joyce knew that, because he came out throwing just haymakers after haymaker. And I was watching it with my friend, and we sort of watched the first round, and we were both like, well, that should, if anything, that should be a 10-8 for Joyce, because he had him visibly wobbled and hurt at some point, you know, and he landed sort of 10 punches to 1, and then, you know, then the 3-10-9 cards went in Yoka's favor, and then you thought, okay, he needs a knockout essentially, and obviously Yoka was able to move and kind of buy a bit of time, I suppose. But yeah, will that translate to a 12-round fight? I don't think so. And like you said, it doesn't look like he has got huge power. I mean, he did knock a few people out, but they were sort of lower level Olympians. But yeah, I mean, does it really matter? He could probably, I don't know, work his way to a European title shot, can't he? Fighting no hopers and make a lot of money. I guess that'll probably be enough. The one I was always curious about was, I remember you were a big fan of his, the big Croatian guy, who Yoka fought him as well, didn't he? And robbed him in the semi-final.
Yeah, Filip Hrgović.
Hrgović, that was it. Yeah, Hrgović. Because I remember you saying at the time he would make a good pro. Is there any news of him turning over, or sort of any stories?
He's going to turn pro.
Oh, he is. Okay. Oh, great.
Yeah, he hasn't signed with anyone or anything yet. You know, I've always said from the very beginning that out of all of those guys, Hrgović is, I think, by far the best pro out of all of them. He's had almost 30 WSP fights, and you know how similar those are to pro fights, and they're 5 rounds.
Yeah.
He's like well past his apprenticeship, you know, and he only lost about 4 of them, and these are good fighters he's beating a lot of the time. You know, top amateurs. It's not like you're handpicking some stiffs.
Yeah, exactly. You know? He's not padding his record, is he? He's fighting the best around. And he was very tall, wasn't he? If I'm remembering correctly, isn't he sort
6'5"?
6'5". Yeah. So I mean, he was impressive to me. And again, I thought he beat Yoka in the semi-final. It seemed like several guys beat Yoka, and yet he still won the tournament. But yeah, I'm excited to see him as a pro, because, like you said, it seems like he's sort of ready, and they could move him quite quickly potentially. On that note, we've had a question in, and I have to confess I haven't seen anything about this. I don't know if it's true or not. It's in the chat on the YouTube about, there are rumors that Joe Joyce is going to be signing with Frank Warren. I haven't read anything about that. I haven't really been keeping up with the Warren BT stuff. I've only been seeing sort of which fights have been announced, but Joyce is turning pro, isn't he? I mean, it's all gone a bit quiet on that front. I thought he would have signed with Hearn by now, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, basically everyone is saying he's going to sign with Frank Warren. I don't know how legit that is, but it's coming from, you know, a lot of people. Some people more credible than others. But Joyce is in the U.S. right now with the GB squad, you know, as is Anthony Fowler. I guess they're just waiting out their contracts with the GB squad. I mean, you don't have to wait out your contract. Like some guys turn pro earlier, and you know, I don't think the Team GB is really all that bothered by it.
But they're essentially getting a salary, aren't they? So why would they?
Yeah, exactly.
Turn that down. Yeah, I mean, the Fowler thing, I was sure that he'd be a lot more sort of mouthy in the press talking about turning over, but maybe maybe getting absolutely destroyed in the first round has humbled him a bit. We'll see. But Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, what would you make of Joyce as a pro? I know he's a bit older, isn't he? I think he might need to be
He's 30,
moved
he's
quite quickly.
31.
Mm,
But the thing is, I think, a lot of people are quite negative about Joyce, and I'm not. I there's not too many heavyweights with a better engine than Joe Joyce. Like,
mm.
he just keeps coming and coming and coming.
Yeah, for a very thick, heavy-set guy,
Yeah,
he has
yeah.
got very good stamina. I agree with you. Yeah, he looks like
And
a bit of a lump.
even obviously, like, he's a bit stiff and he's kind of slow sometimes, but try fighting him. Like,
Yeah,
that's a really difficult task, and especially once you put those pro gloves on him, imagine how much damage he's going to be doing. I know, like, his defense isn't the best, and he's been stopped a few times, but the last time he got stopped was like in 2013. So that's quite a while ago, and he's really improved a lot since then. So
and
I rate.
he started boxing quite late, didn't he? When he was a bit older, I
Oh
think.
yeah,
I think I read
like
that.
20, 24, or
Yeah.
23 or something like that.
So you'd like to
So
think he's got a few less miles on the clock potentially, but
yeah, I rate him higher than most people do.
yeah. Okay, because I mean, I was impressed, and like I say, I did think he won the final. I thought he should have got a gold medal, but equally, I wasn't absolutely blown away by him. And I think, yeah, if anything, the most impressive was Hrgovic, and I don't know. I'm assuming they fought in the WSB, but I would sort of, if that had been the final, I would have probably favoured Hrgovic to beat him. But maybe these three can all meet as pros, and I don't know, maybe that could be a sort of European fight down the line.
Joyce was one of Hrgovic's only losses in WSB. It was a split decision.
Okay. Well, there you go. There you go. It's all set up for the rematch. But yeah, so that was all I wanted to say on that, because I know I just knew you were a bit skeptical on Yoka. But yeah, he's turned pro, and we've also had just news in the last couple of days. Gamboa's signed with Golden Boy and will be fighting, I believe, on the he's on the undercard of
Lemieux and Stevens.
Yes, Lemieux. Yeah. And look, Gamboa's a really exciting fighter. I know he's sort of turned into a bit of a joke, but anything that means he's actually going to be fighting 2 or 3 times a year, I'm happy with. I'd rather see him fight rubbish, poor opponents than not fight at all. So yeah, that was good news for me. Before we get on to the previews, do you want to say anything about Canelo Chavez? I don't want to go down to the rabbit hole too much on it, but I mean, it is all signed now, isn't it?
Yeah.
For May, and 164.5 pounds. I mean, to be honest, I'm more interested in the 24/7 than the fight. Genuinely, I think the 24/7 could be really funny. With Chavez just sort of, doped up to the gills, diuretics coming out of everywhere, trying to look like he's naturally losing the weight. I really can't see any way he makes under 165 pounds without some help. But we'll see. Look, the fight itself probably won't be that bad. I mean, they'll both just throw power shots, won't they? And you imagine that Canelo would be able to take a decision and sort of control the distance enough. Because if anything, Chavez has regressed, I think, quite a lot since his days of fighting Martinez and that. But yeah, if you had any thoughts on it at all before we go on to the previews.
Well, I mean, I'm fine with the fight as long as Canelo fights Golovkin next. Because really, who else is Canelo going to fight in the meantime? There's not that much, and from their standpoint, they're going to try to maximize how much money they can make before they take the ultimate risk and fight Golovkin. So
I think I read somewhere that Canelo accounted for something like over 95% of Golden Boy's revenue, which and right. When you put it like that, you think, really, if you're running a business, are you gonna jeopardize 95% of your revenue? If he can make money elsewhere, but like you say, after Chavez, what's he going to do? He won't be able to go right the way back down to 154. There aren't any mega fights at 154. He'll have to pray that Cotto puts together some sort of big run, which would make a rematch, a worthwhile sell. But equally, at 160, there's no one to fight apart from Triple G. I mean, no other fight really justifies pay-per-view. I don't care if it's Saunders who, with a belt, or if it's a guy like I don't know, Chris Eubank Jr. or someone like that. Those fights aren't in the same league as Triple G. So yeah, you think he is running out of options gradually. And yeah, I agree with you. I'm fine with it with the caveat that we see the Golovkin fight in September. And I think if we have to wait till 2018 for that, which I can quite easily see happening, I think that'll be a real shame and very disappointing, especially from a guy like Oscar, who really did fight everyone. Right now, the home stretch, we're almost there, but obviously huge weekend of fights. I was thinking earlier, actually genuinely trying to plan my Saturday night. I'll be staying up for them, but I really hope that the HBO card doesn't directly coincide with Showtime. I hope one of them starts an hour ahead. Maybe I know that HBO's from Fantasy Springs, which is that California? I forget.
Yeah, they're in the same time zone, Las Vegas and California.
I was hoping they might be one time zone apart, and they might start slightly different times. It's a shame. But yeah, I mean, I guess I'll have to miss the HBO card, but I'm really looking forward to that. I think it looks really good as well. Should we start from the top with Frampton Santa Cruz? First of all, who did you think won the first fight?
Frampton. Sorry about that.
Clearly, or do you think it was close? Because I mean, I had it a draw, and again, I've scored it twice, and I've had it a draw.
I thought it was
times.
Close but clear.
Okay, that's fair. Who do you expect to win the rematch?
I think Frampton's going to win it again this time in clearer fashion than last time.
Do you think he will need to win it clearer to get a decision in Vegas?
I don't think so. I mean, we've seen with James DeGale how some of the scorecards he's gotten in really close fights, wide scorecards. So I don't think
there seems to be something about the East Coast. I agree with you, because obviously Frampton Santa Cruz won. That was in New York, wasn't it, at the Barclays? And I thought that was, two of the cards were way too wide. I thought that was never a 117, 111 fight. I don't think, even if you do think Frampton clearly won, it was never a 9-3 fight. But Frampton got the clear decision. Obviously, DeGale got the decision over Dirrell on the East Coast. He got the decision against, or he, some people say he got lucky against Jack. East Coast again. Yeah, I do think the robbery angle is being slightly overplayed, but I think if the fight goes the same as it did the first time, I can see Santa Cruz nicking a decision, because the rematch would be huge if they were one apiece, and it was legitimate. It wasn't a sort of robbery to get us there. I can see that being a huge third fight. So you're picking Frampton. I'm really on the fence about this one. I think there's value in a Santa Cruz decision, which is about 2-1 with the bookies. But you have to think. I always go back to the logic of if one guy sort of won the first fight, chances are he's going to win the rematch, and he's going to win it more decisively. Because for all of Santa Cruz's sort of talks about being a little bit off in the first fight, and I did think he was a bit off, actually. I think he has got a point, but I'm not convinced that means he'll be able to completely change his game plan and sort of come out with a different style in the rematch. I don't think he's that sort of fighter. I think he's got one way to do things, and I think Frampton will be well prepared for it. I guess it will really boil down to whether Santa Cruz will be able to sort of whether he'll be ready for Frampton's counterpunching and all the rest of it. Because I'm not convinced the tactic of his camp seemed to say, yeah, we just need to do more of the same. I'm not convinced more of the same will be enough. Although, look, there's no losers really. It will be I think it will almost certainly be a very good fight, and respect to both of them for taking the rematch immediately. I know it was contractual, but still, Santa Cruz wanted the immediate rematch. He didn't go off and take a soft touch or a resume sort of stacking win or anything like that, or he didn't demand an Andre Ward, two knockovers before he takes the tough fight again. So yeah, respect to both of them. Great fight. It's really tough. I mean, I think I'll probably have to go with a Frampton decision. I don't see a knockout, but equally, I think it'll be really close, and it really could be one of those ones where the benefit of the doubt will go to the home guy, just because I think there's so much incentive to get a trilogy going. And really, if Frampton loses a very close decision, there's no shame in that. His stock wouldn't go down at all, I don't think. Whereas maybe Santa Cruz coming off 2 losses there would be a bit of rebuilding that was necessary. Sorry, you were going to say.
I think last time, Santa Cruz made a big deal about the Irish fans influencing the decision. Well, supposedly there's 4 times as many Irish coming over for this fight as there was for New York. So I don't know if how much effect that'll have, but it could play a part possibly.
Well,
But
I mean,
being in Vegas,
there must be. I actually don't know the amount that have gone out, but you think it would be. I mean, it's got to be 500 to 1,000 people. I can't remember the record.
More than that.
Is it? I mean, I always think they're overstated. I mean, I've read that it's sort of 2,000 or 3,000. I think that's overstating it a little bit. I mean, how many did Ricky Hatton used to get? He used to get about 5,000, didn't he? Going out with him, that sort of, which is a huge amount when you think about
Joe
it.
Joe Calzaghe against Bernard Hopkins, didn't he get like 7,000 or something?
Yeah, and obviously Hatton versus Floyd was crazy. I think they had like 10,000 go out for that. That was absolutely ridiculous. That was one of the fights where genuinely I don't think Americans could sort of appreciate how big that was, because obviously they'd had Floyd for a long time, and they're used to their guys fighting in the biggest events. I remember going to a bar for Hatton versus Floyd, and the pub had stayed open late and done like a lot. The pubs in England up until recently were very strict about closing at 11 p.m. And the pub had done a lock-in, and usually if you do a lock-in, the owner might get six to 12 guys and let them sort of stay behind the bar and drink sort of quietly with the lights off. And this was a lock-in where there were probably 150 people inside, and 90% of them had no interest in boxing at all. They didn't, they couldn't have told you who was who, but they went absolutely crazy for the fight and really enjoyed it. And obviously, we got a very, very aesthetically pleasing knockout at the end of it. I can't see it going quite the same way. I would be surprised if either guy knocked the other one out, But yeah, I mean, the atmosphere should be great. And I don't think Santa Cruz is as big a draw. As you said, I don't think he's as big a draw as some people say. It's not as if he sells out arenas in LA. And we know that the Irish do travel, and they are prepared to sort of take a week holiday to go and support their fighters. And Frampton is obviously very, very popular over there, and also a sort of genuinely nice guy who is a very good interview. If anyone hasn't seen the Showtime clips previewing this fight, there's a really good interview with one of the Showtime guys who's gone out to Belfast and is sitting in the pub with Frampton, and he's a very, very good talker, and just really he's like Ricky Hatton, he's a very likable guy, and very good on the mic, and I think people respond to that, and he's obviously got a huge army of fans now who are prepared to travel wherever. I mean, the dream is a trilogy in Belfast, but I can't see Santa Cruz ever going to Ireland, sadly. I think it's much more likely to be in LA or somewhere like that. So you're going for a Frampton win. I think I'm going for a narrow Frampton win, but I do think it will be really close, and it could be a controversial one. With both sides having a claim to have won the fight. The draw's only 18-1 though, so I'm not going to bet it. Odds aren't good enough. Right, Ryan, on the undercard. Garcia versus Zlaticanin for the WBC title at lightweight. I love this fight. I think there's going to be knockdowns all over the place. Both guys could potentially go down. I think Garcia will stop him. What's your preview?
Yeah, I think Mikey's just too talented to mess this one up. Maybe he'll go down once. He's gone down at like 126, 130.
Yeah.
But even then, Zlaticanin is like 5'4", and Mikey's the bigger guy here, and the more technically skilled and gifted guy. And
he's Garcia. I think what people are underestimating is Garcia is such a straight puncher, and Zlaticanin is good. He's not a crude sort of slugger at all. He's got a bit of a slugging kind of style, but he's a bit like Salido. There's a lot of subtle kind of shifts, and there's lots of subtle bits of footwork that can go unnoticed. And Zlaticanin is a serious sort of top 5 guy in the division. He's a very good fighter, but I think it could end up looking a bit like the Salido fight, where Zlaticanin is not sort of laid out on his back, but he's just getting sort of stopped in his tracks over and over again by the straight punches of Garcia. So do you think Mikey knocks him out?
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I'm actually going to bet on Mikey. That's how confident I am in Mikey here.
I think you can get him. I think you can get Garcia at 2-1.
Yeah.
The Frampton points and Garcia stoppage is about 5-1 as a double, which isn't a bad bet. Do you think, does Zlaticanin have a chance? I mean, I've said sort of on the record, I'm a big Garcia fan, but I've said if Zlaticanin is going to win, I think he needs to win early and he needs to kind of rush Garcia.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, in Garcia's last fight, like he looked awful the first 2 rounds, and then in the third round, he finally got warmed up and then started to hurt him.
Yeah, so, but he's always done that. As I remember against fucking an absolute ghost Juanma Lopez about 3 or 4 years ago. Garcia took about a round and a half to warm up in that one, and Lopez had nothing to offer him. Juanma was totally done, but Garcia still, he needed a round and a half, almost 2 rounds to sort of get his distance down, and then as soon as he had it locked in, he knocked him out within half a round. And I think you could see something similar, although I really don't want people to think that I'm dismissing Zlaticanin, because I've seen him several times and he is a very good fighter and a very worthy sort of contender at this level. Where would you like to see the winner go? I'd love to see Garcia against Linares in the future, assuming both of them win their next fights.
Yeah, I mean, as far as if Mikey wins, or really either guy wins, I mean, unification fight would seem like the best thing to do. I know Mikey wants to go to 140. I'm not sure I don't think that's a good idea, but
no, I don't either. I think,
and because Mikey is one of those guys who doesn't have the same passion for the sport that most fighters do. In that, he took those like 2.5 years off and didn't really care.
Yeah,
and he's always said like he doesn't really like boxing that much. He's just good at it. So I think I could see him doing that for money.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I mean, I think famously about two years ago or whatever, when he was trying to get out of his contract with Arum, he said, "Look, I'll give you one more fight. I'll fight Crawford," because Arum wanted to make the Crawford fight, and he said, "Yeah, I'll fight Crawford, but I want you to release me from my contract afterwards." And Arum wouldn't do it, so he took him to the courts. But Mikey's been quite open, saying that Crawford beat him in the amateurs, and he thinks Crawford would beat him again. And to be honest, at 140, I think that's a very, very tough fight for Garcia. But at 135, I like him enough to make him the favorite over pretty much anyone. I'd love to see the Lomachenko fight at some point in the future. I don't know, Lomachenko's got no reason to move up anytime soon, but I think that could be potentially brilliant, because I just think Garcia's a phenomenal counter-puncher, I think, when he's on his game. And he really does do everything well. He doesn't make any stupid mistakes. And like you say, he's been down, but I've never seen him seriously hurt. I do remember that Burgos wobbled him, but he wasn't, he recovered within a couple of seconds. I've never seen him seriously hurt in a fight. And I think, Zlaticanin's a good finisher. He's very aggressive. If he hurts him early, you never know. But I think this is set up for Garcia to look very, very good and sort of announce himself. Last one on that card is Lee Selby against is it Victor Barros or
Jonathan Victor Barros.
Again, I think I know the name. I'm sure I've seen him once or twice. I'm not that interested in Selby at the moment. He really has he's squandered all the momentum he had 2 years ago. How do you see this one going? He's not looked good in his last couple of fights, Selby. I mean, he got Eric Hunter dropped him quite heavily. And he's not been fighting good opposition, really.
Well, he's barely been fighting at all.
No. And that Montiel fight, oh god, that was awful. Like, I've never seen a more obviously roided fighter than Montiel that night, and yet, Selby had this tiny little sort of 5'2" guy in front of him, bouncing up and down, and he couldn't really do anything with him. How do you see this one going? Sort of routine Selby points win?
No, Selby is a massive favorite with the bookies, and I completely disagree with that. Just because, I don't think Barros is going to win, but I think he's going to be competitive.
You think it's a close fight? Yeah.
Well, maybe like 9-3, 8-4 Selby possibly, but Barros is the type of guy who can stick around and kind of nick rounds and stuff like that. Like he just went to Japan and beat Hosono split decision in
Mm,
order to become the mandatory for this. So I mean, he's been around a long time, and he knows how to win rounds and kind
yeah,
of nick nick them and get the judges here and there. And Selby just isn't that great, so I don't think he should be that big of a favorite.
yeah,
Um, I mean, I know for like when I bet, I use American style odds, so it's like minus 2,200. I think that's like
yeah.
22 to 1.
No, yeah, no, I think 2,200. I think that's just almost 2.5 to 1. I think 100 is like 1 unit for us. So if I say 2 to 1, that's minus 200. No, sorry,
Yeah,
that's or plus
yeah.
200.
This
Is it?
is
Would the underdog be plus or minus?
the underdogs plus.
Okay, so 2 to 1 would be plus 200 then.
Oh yeah, I can I can look up
I was trying to
odds
learn this the other
converter.
day because I read it on. I was reading
Yeah,
it
because
online and
I only use American odds, and then obviously like all the Brits and Irish, they use the fractions,
yeah.
and so
Well, it took me. I mean, it took me fucking 20 years to learn the fractions, to be honest with you. But I keep seeing it written down on
oh
sort of
yeah, this
UFC
is
sites. Um,
1 to 20. That's what
1 to 20. Okay, yeah, yeah.
that's what Selby is. Well, around there last time I checked.
And that's minus 200 in American.
Minus 2,200.
Minus 2,200. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna understand this one day. But yeah, I agree with you. It was a bit like, it reminds me a bit of Jamie McDonnell against what's his face, the guy who should have beaten him last year.
Laborio Solis.
Yeah, Solis, where I bet on Solis. I didn't necessarily think he'd win, but I just thought the odds were way too wide for what was
Right.
a competitive fight. And I think you're probably right here. I'd be amazed if Barros won, because Selby, for all his faults, has got a pretty good chin and pretty good defense. And even if he's even if he's missing and sort of not looking great, it's pretty hard to just sort of lay him out or sort of hurt him significantly. Like I say, he was dropped against Hunter, but he did recover pretty well. But yeah, you might have a point there because there's no way he should be a 20 to 1 favorite. It's not that sort of fight at all. And we've seen him, he's struggled in this last 2 fights and he's been very inactive. So I don't see how anyone could be that confident picking him. The word on the street is it will be, what they're looking to do is Frampton versus Selby, assuming both of them win. And that would presumably be in Belfast because Selby doesn't really have he doesn't really have the sort of popularity to demand that fight is in Wales. So that would be a huge, probably outdoor show in the summer at some point. Massive fight that would be. You'd probably get 15 or 20,000, I'd imagine, at that. And sticking a couple of other Irish guys, stick Michael Conlon on the undercard. That could be a really big show. Are you interested in that? Where would you like to see the winner go of Frampton Santa Cruz?
Well, I think I like a Selby fight. Unification, and it gets rid of kind of a paper champion.
It gets rid of the weakest guy, doesn't it? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I like that fight, and I mean, it'd be big over there, and people would want to see it. So I could get down with that fight.
Do you think the winner of this one? Do you think the winner of this one is clear? Has sort of established themselves as number one in the division, or because I was having a debate the other day where they said that I think someone was saying that Frampton was number one at 126, and I was saying Frampton probably has the best win at that weight, but I don't think there is a clear number one at 126. I think it's very open.
I think Frampton's definitely number one if he wins this fight. 2 wins over Santa Cruz, and Santa Cruz has a win over Mares.
Yeah,
who
that's true. Who's a belt holder as well, yeah.
Just beat Cuellar. And then Gary Russell Jr. really, I mean, he beat Johnny Gonzalez to win his belts.
Yeah.
And then Oscar Valdez is like still in the beginning stages of world level.
Yeah, so. And let's be real. I really like Valdez. I think he's one of my favorite fighters to watch already. But he's still fighting fringe contenders at best. He hasn't really. I mean, what's his best win? Chris Avalos, someone that Frampton was beating, years and years ago. Yeah, I see what you mean. I think Frampton probably would have the best claim as number one. But yeah, it's an interesting division because I'd love to see the Russell fight for the winner. I think it's a great style matchup. I actually think Russell would have a very easy time with Santa Cruz. Funnily enough, I think he could really time him on the counters. But Frampton versus Russell would be great. I mean, both arguably the two most skilled guys in the division, I'd say. Right, we mentioned it earlier. Just moving on briefly because we've been going an hour and a half now. We're doing all right for time. On HBO, Fantasy Springs, as you pointed out, happening at exactly the same time, so I won't be able to watch both of them. We've got Francisco Vargas defending his WBC £130 title against Miguel Berchelt, and then we've got Takashi Miura, who Vargas won the title from last year. Sorry, a year and a bit ago, 2015, against Mickey Roman. And then we've got Toriano Johnson against Gutierrez. That's the guy who fought Rosado, isn't it?
Yeah, and arguably won.
Yeah, it was a close fight. Yeah, it was close. Yeah, I mean, has Johnson fought since the Eamon O'Kane thing?
No, he had a torn rotator cuff and took a while to get him back.
I mean, it could be a banana skin, this one.
Yeah, it could be, but I think Johnson is, too sharp for Gutierrez, who's not really the biggest puncher. He's more of an accumulation type of guy. And I think, Johnson is just better at that type of game and more schooled.
Yeah, I would agree that I think he's a clear favourite. But, I mean...
Should be an action fight.
Yeah, it should be fun. I mean, Johnson's not the biggest puncher, is he? He throws a lot of shots. He fights up close. I mean, I always thought it was a shame they never got the rematch with Curtis Stevens because I felt that was the win that Johnson needed to sort of establish himself. And he's a nice guy as well. He's good on Twitter. If anyone who's listening doesn't follow him, he's worth a follow. Got some good opinions about the sport and isn't sort of too partisan in terms of who he supports and who he cheers for. Let's move up the card then. Mickey Roman against Takashi Miura. Roman, he's a gatekeeper at best, and he's sort of an NABO level fighter. If Miura's got anything left, he should knock him out. But I had a look at that guy Miura fought last summer. I think it was his fourth fight. He was something like 2-2, and he's now something like 8-5. Just awful, like a kid. Absolute sort of child that they put him in with coming off the Vargas loss. Don't like that matchmaking at all. It's always a red flag when I see fights like that because I just think that's such a soft, it's almost pointless. Putting a guy in that. I'm going to get this guy's record up now. I can't. He was called Bobby something, and he was literally like a 19-year-old kid fighting against a 32-year-old former champion, Jimmy Bourbon. And his record is 5-4-3, and his record at the time when he fought Miura was 5-2-2. So that's I don't like that matching. I don't like that matchmaking at all. He's lost 3 of his last 4. What do we think? It's hard to tell how much Miura's got left, but he's got too much for Roman, hasn't he? Surely.
No, I'm going to disagree with you.
Oh, okay, good.
Yeah, I'm going to disagree with you. I don't think Mickey Roman's a gatekeeper. I mean, he's won like 20 fights in a row or something, and he's beaten pretty decent guys. I mean, earlier last year, he went to Spain and beat Hui Hiner in one of the better fights of last year. If you haven't seen it, you should check it out. It was really good.
I don't think I have seen that one actually. No, I'll look that one up. I say gatekeeper, it's probably being a bit harsh, but I really mean that every time he's stepped up in the past, he has got sort of conclusively beaten. I think, he got knocked out by DeMarco, didn't he, a few years back? And
yeah.
Who else did he?
He's on a really good run right now. And, this is a chance to finally not come up short at the top level. I mean, I think he's come along a bit. He's 31, but he still has a lot left in the tank based on what he did last year. So I think this is going to be a brutal fight. I think they're going to, take a lot out of each other.
Yep.
Especially because Miura doesn't move his head.
No, he really doesn't.
He just gets hit again and again.
And he doesn't have a guard. Like, he literally doesn't have a guard. He never puts his gloves together. He stands there with his hands out, ready to punch. And seemingly, I mean, again, I know Vargas has got fast hands, but from watching the Vargas fight, Miura's only defense was his reactions to kind of move his head back. That was it. He doesn't do anything else, and he doesn't jab. He never jabs either. So, I mean, if you're Roman, what are your tactics for this one? Do you just go into the trenches, or do you try and sort of box him for the first few rounds?
I think it would be better to get up close to Miura because
smother him a bit.
If you're kind of in his range, then he can throw that left hand.
Yeah,
and if
he can really punch. It sounds like we're criticizing him. He's a very good fighter and he can really punch. But yeah, his defense is abysmal, but his chin is very good. So it's kind of a two-part equation. But yeah, sorry, Ryan, go on. You say get up close and sort of try and smother him a bit.
If you can take away the space for that left hand, then you can try to work him on the inside, and just try to outwork him and hit him a lot, because he's not going to be blocking many of the shots with anything other than his face.
Yeah.
So I think that's going to be a storm boner, as Kell would say.
I think Lampley said. I think it's quite funny. I actually watched the Vargas fight earlier today when I was on the train, and the Vargas Miura fight, obviously. And I don't think Lampley had seen Miura before, because he kind of knew a bit about him. And he said he'd spoken to Mr. Honda, his promoter, and he'd asked him for kind of a breakdown. And Mr. Honda had said apparently that he was like a truck. He just kept coming forward. And Lampley said, I like the sound of that. I'm looking forward to it. And after about 5 rounds, Lampley goes, it's become incredibly apparent to me that Takashi Miura's defense is his chin. And Roy Jones goes, yep, some fighters, the chin is all they need. And I thought, yeah, that's pretty much true. He really doesn't care about getting hit flush, does he? Like, he'll just take them. And he reminds me a bit of, who's the guy who fought Kessler? Andrade. Do you remember him?
Yeah, Andrade.
Where he just didn't care about getting hit flush in the face. It just didn't bother him at all, because he knew he could take it. And Miura seems to have that kind of attitude. I mean, so you think it'll be close? I mean, I think Miura, if he's still got it and Vargas hasn't taken it out of him, I think he'll knock Roman out maybe 7th or 8th round, something like that. I don't think Roman will be able to take the power. That's the thing. Whereas I think Miura probably will.
Yeah, I think that's the likely outcome. Miura kind of late stoppage, possibly maybe mid-rounds stoppage.
But you could see him getting lit up a bit by Roman.
Yeah.
Well, look, it's a good fight. I mean, the winner will almost certainly get the winner of the main event. The main event is a really interesting fight, I think. These are, I don't know if it's the same in North America, but the prices for Vargas and Berchelt, it's almost a 50-50. Vargas is a slight favourite, which I think is right. But Berchelt's a funny one. I've seen him a few times, and the first time I ever saw him was when he got knocked out in 2014. Do you remember?
That was kind of a fluke. Eh?
Yeah, it was. Yeah, because the opponent was awful. And since then, I've noticed that his guard is much better, and he does make some mistakes. I've noticed that he does sometimes throw punches from sort of stupidly out of range. Like the Amir Khan uppercut when he's a foot away from the opponent. He throws hooks sometimes when he is miles away, and you think a very good fighter would be able to make him pay for that. I think Vargas will win this, and it's Berchelt really hasn't fought anyone, although he has knocked out almost everyone he has fought. But it's quite a big step up. Do you think we'll see the same Vargas, or will his last 2 fights have taken something out of him as well?
I think for now he's still going to have enough left. I mean, the part of the problem is his face is going to swell up like every single time now, and he's going to get cut really easily. So that's always going to be a concern. And
he's got the scar tissue around his eyes, hasn't he? Forever now. Yeah.
Berchelt is going to be there to hit, but he's also going to be hitting back quite hard. So I think this is going to be another all action fight. I wouldn't be surprised if both guys went down at one point or another. It just depends. Vargas is the more polished guy for sure. I mean, he was an Olympian in 2008, and Berchelt he's a pretty rugged, strong guy. But we'll see how much his chin can take, and see if that one loss was really a fluke or not, or if he has a bit of glass in his jaw. So
I think, yeah, it's hard to tell because of the competition, but I do agree with you. I think Vargas, like you said, he will bleed from his face. He's a bit of a Linares now.
Yeah.
He used to be a lovely boxer, Vargas. Like I remember seeing him on a Broner undercard or on one of those Showtime shows where Broner's sort of in the front row. I think it was in Cincinnati. Definitely in Ohio somewhere. And Vargas came in and he fought Brandon Bennett, who I think was a friend of Broner's. And it was a Showtime Extreme card, maybe 2013, something like that. And I'd never seen Vargas before. And he came in with that mask and the cowboy hat, the black hat. And I thought, okay, this guy looks quite cool. Let's see what he's going to do. And Steve Farhood said, this guy was an Olympian, but that's about all I know about him. And after about 6 rounds, Vargas just basically won every round and won a very wide decision and sort of completely shut him down. And I thought, okay, this guy's quite good. He's a bit of a boring, he's a bit boring, a bit of a boxer. And then I sort of followed him after that. And I noticed that he started to knock out quite a few people. And it seems like he really got the boxer puncher thing going. But then you can just, a war like the damage done to his face and, the tissue in his face, against Miura and against Salido, because that eye went very early against Salido, didn't it? The same one. The same wound sort of opened up. And you have to think, I mean, if it hasn't taken something out of him, then he's superhuman, to be honest. No one's got the 6 degrees of Tony Dodson yet. I will give out the answer in a moment. So, Ryan, just to finish off, who are you picking for the main event? Did you say you were going with Vargas?
Yeah, I'm going with Vargas. I think late stoppage, probably. I don't think this one's going to go the distance, and if it does, then it'll say a lot about Berchelt.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think there'll be no shame in losing a decision to Vargas because I think it's quite clear that he's sort of the more skilled of the two. But I can see Berchelt getting. I think Vargas is too accurate. He's too accurate with the counter punches, and his hands are fast. His hands are a lot faster than Berchelt's, I think, or from what I've seen. So yeah, I'd agree with that. I think that's about it. The Eubank card's not this weekend, is it? I keep having nightmares that I'm going to end up getting drunk and ordering it.
Nah, next.
Next, okay. Okay, so I think that's about all. We don't have a card on Friday. So yeah, unless there's anything else, I will give out right the answer. Now we've had actually no sorry, we did get a couple of questions through, and I always forget to read them, and people get annoyed. So I'll just give you a couple of these. There's literally only 2 off the top of my head. So we've got if Kell Brook vacates without fighting Spence, will he go down as one of the worst champions ever? 3 abysmal, nonsense defenses, having controversially won it and then vacating before his next mandatory. I think it's a bit harsh, but do you think Brook would go down as one of the weakest champions in sort of recent, or not weakest, one of the worst title reigns in recent memory?
Not really. I mean, because there's just so many paper champions around nowadays, because you can get that belt and milk it for quite a long time. Obviously, it's hard to come up with ones off the top of my head, but I mean, yeah, I can't really think of some bad ones off the top of my head, but I know there's been ones that weren't good at all. Like quite a few.
Well, Flanagan's got to be up there, right? In terms of, I mean, I do hold out hope that Flanagan will unify at some point, just because I think he wants a big show, and I don't think he can get it off. He doesn't have enough fans, to get it off his own back. I could see Flanagan going to the States to fight someone like Verdejo or someone like, I guess maybe Garcia. I mean, Garcia said for years, didn't he, that he wanted to fight Flanagan. Obviously saw him as the weakest champion. But yeah, Flanagan's up there. Who was the other one who... I mean, to be honest, Wilder's pretty bad. If you look at who he's fought, there's no one in the top 15 that Wilder's fought.
I mean, you could say when Ricky Burns fought Carl Johansson and Andreas Evanson.
Burns' initial run, right? Was that with the WBO as well? I think.
Probably.
Yeah, that was awful. But then, to be fair to Burns, he had a good run of defenses when he stepped up, and obviously should have lost most of them. But yeah, we won't go down that rabbit hole. Right, Ryan. As I said at the beginning, we had 6 degrees of Tony Dodson this week. It was Junior Witter to Azuma Nelson, and we had a few good answers. I think Cy Thompson was the closest. He managed to do it in 5. He went. No, he said. No, it's wrong again. No, sorry. No, he's got this one. Okay, he's written it the other way around. Junior Witter to Vivian Harris to Lascano to Jesse James Lehar to Azuma Nelson. That's five total moves. Very good. Well done. 1 point for Cy. We had Witter to Vivian Harris to Ivan Robinson to Gatti to Gabrielas to Nelson. Pretty good. Quite like that one. It's a bit of a scenic route. We had one involving Oscar De La Hoya, which I loved. Witter, Judah, Floyd, De La Hoya, Whitaker, Nelson. Now that's an all-star chain that's Junior Witter somehow inserted himself into. The route I originally did was Witter to Vivian Harris to I always forget how to pronounce his first name. Diobalis Hurtado, the guy who fought Costa.
Yeah.
Hurtado, who fought Whitaker, who then fought Azuma Nelson. That was the closest I could do it in 5 total moves. It could be done quicker. I don't know if there's a quicker way to get from Whitaker to Vivian Harris. I don't think there is. They certainly never fought each other. God, can you imagine how that would have ended if they had? Bloody hell. But yeah, no, that was the one for this week. I'll try and think of a more sort of comical one. I do enjoy linking guys like Josh Warrington to all-time greats. It's good fun. But yeah, so we're going. Let's just to round up our picks. We're both going Frampton decision, aren't we?
Yeah.
We're both going Garcia stoppage. We're not disagreeing again. We're both going Selby decision. What did you say? You said Vargas stoppage, didn't you? I think I might go for a Vargas decision. I feel like he might. I feel like he might play it safe with his face and sort of stay out of trouble a bit. We're both going Miura knockout, and then Johnson Gutierrez. Are you going for Turiano Johnson?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Points.
Right, fuck it. I'll go Gutierrez then. Points. With Johnson getting knocked down or something crazy like that. And then we'll see how we get on. But yeah, I'll try and get you back on next week, mate, if you're available, because we can have a big old review. I don't have the voice to do it on my own, sadly, and no one else wants to come on. No one else likes me enough to come on. But yeah, no, you're very welcome to come back on next week, and then we'll have a big preview of the Eubank Junior card. Please don't tell me you're going to be watching that. I really want to try and make sure I'm busy so I don't end up sticking it on, because I know if I'm at home I will end up putting it on the TV, and I really want to try and take myself out of the house, and make sure I'm far away. Oh dear, but we'll cross that.
I have to stream everything from over there anyway, so.
Yeah, you can't get it legally, can you? There's no way.
No, there's no way. Like none of the Sky or Box Nation fights or ITV or anything really. So
I guess it must be expensive with the licenses. But I always thought a country like Canada, if they released Box Nation over there, could do really good business, because a lot of fans who can't get HBO or Showtime or whatever and are kind of stuck between the two. But yeah, we'll see if that ever happens. Maybe with the BT deal, you never know. We're getting ESPN now, so you guys might get our channels. But anyway, thank you very much for joining me, Ryan, and we will talk again in a week, I imagine. Yeah, cheers, mate. Anyway.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
No problem.